don't even know how many of these revision streams I've done, but what I do know is we have an assessment in just about 2 days. It's on Tuesday, and everything that I need to revise is written here. So we need to go over, so the topic we're doing right now, I don't know the specific name of it actually, but it's like homeostasis, like regulating things. So you got obviously the action potential, which is what I've started to draw here. The Pacinian corpuscle, which is basically like pressure receptors. Photoreceptors, which is obviously in your eyes, to detect light. And then myogenic tissue, which is what regulates the cardiac cycle. Now, out of all of these, I have forgotten most of them, except for myogenic tissue, which we'll go over right at the end of this stream, because I am aware of how that one works. In summary, it is a wave of excitation in the sinoatrial node. That wave of excitation travels to both atrias, which depolarizes them, causing them to contract, which is obviously part of the cardiac cycle. And then in the second part, a wave of excitation is released in the AVN, the atrioventricular node. That travels down the bundle of His, which reaches the ventricles, depolarizing them, and they contract from the apex. So that's the myogenic tissue stuff. I think that was right anyways, from what I can recall, but we'll do that at the end anyways. I want to start off with the action potential, which sounds difficult, but honestly, I don't think it is too bad. So let's just see how much we can remember. So this is the initial setup. Where we're at right now is going to be the axon, the membrane in the axon, I believe, or the, it's going to be, if we have like, let me just try and draw like a nerve cell here. I forgot what they look like. Bro, I forgot what nerve cells look like. But it's here. It's the axon membranes where they're located. So that's where we are right now. So what we have here is the sodium ion channels, and these are initially going to be closed. So I guess different color. That's black. So these are initially going to be closed. The NAK pump, the sodium potassium pump, is going to be, doing its thing. And then the leaky potassium channels are also going to be open, which is why they're called leaky potassium, channels, because they are allowing potassium in. So basically, the idea you need to get about for this first stage is the idea that it's very polarized. It's minus 70 millivolts. Some people say that it's minus 65, so we'll go with that. But I think either works. So to begin with, it's minus 65 millivolts. This negative potential is maintained because the sodium ion channels are closed. The NAK pump is pumping out free sodium and it's letting in 2 potassium. So obviously, more ions are being released than they are being let in. And then the leaky potassium, I don't recall which direction they go. I would assume that it goes this way to help maintain a concentration gradient. But I'm not too sure. So let's go check my book. And we'll go and we'll try and recount this. Because again, this topic is something we haven't done in a couple of months, so it's detrimental to try and remember as much of this as possible without looking at our book. So, when there is no stimuli, the resting potential is minus 70 millivolts. This is because the sodium channels are closed, K plus channels are leaking potassium, so it doesn't specify there where they're leaking at. Oh, they're going into the cell, okay. I did not expect that, to be honest. I guess that helps with a concentration gradient though. Unless she might have just drawn that. I think she's drawn that badly, actually. That's not an arrow that she drew on my book. So I don't actually know where that's meant to be. So I won't draw anything there for now. So, the first bit. The Na plus channels are closed, sodium channels are closed. The potassium ions are leaking potassium, and the NaK plus pump is actively transporting free sodium for every 2 ions. So, I guess some things to note there. Number one, obviously this is the process of active transport. Obviously that sounds simple to say, but you could easily forget that in an exam. But the main thing you need to know is it's going to be 3 Na plus out for every 2K in. Na plus channel is closed, and K plus ion channels. I shouldn't have put ion there. I'm literally saying ion twice. K plus channels are leaking. Cool. Okay. So that is the first step when there is no stimuli. No stimuli, so there is a negative potential. It is polarized. Now, I can quickly draw the diagram here. Maybe this will help. But what it is to begin with, it's the resting potential. And it's basically just like that. Obviously, you have to imagine that both of those lines are the same. And then we can go ahead and draw in the all or nothing like that. Okay, so that is the threshold. The idea is if there's no stimuli, it's a negative charge, like shown here. If a stimuli occurs, if a stimuli is significant enough, it will trigger the all or nothing potential. Basically where the stimuli will go above the threshold necessary to trigger a complete action potential. So, this creates polarization in the cell membrane compared to the outside. So let me see. Yeah, polarization in the cell compared to the outside. Okay, so the next step, and I'm actually gonna there we go. The next step is when there is a stimuli. So when stimuli occurs, what we're going to have is the Na plus channels are going to open, which is going to depolarize it's going to depolarize because now we have sodium diffusing. Sodium diffuses from outside the cell into the cell. So sodium ion channels are open. That's going to raise to 40 millivolts, but only if the stimuli is large enough. So there you go. So when a stimuli occurs, these sodium channels are going to open, but only some. But if the stimuli is large enough, then all sodium ion channels will open, which will allow you to reach the charge of 40 millivolts. And that is because sodium is going to diffuse from outside the cell into the cell. Down a concentration gradient. So it's going to raise the charge inside the cell. It will rapidly increase the charge as sodium ions are going to go into the cell. Once the charge is reached, sodium channels are going to open up, which causes repolarization. So once the charge is reached, so it's like there's three stages. You got resting potential, which is when there's no stimuli, the resting stage. Depolarization, where it goes up rapidly because the channel is open, and then depolarization, where it goes down rapidly. And the idea we need to remember here is the sodium channel is open, which allows for, I think actually there's, okay, one sec. Yeah, they diffuse out of the cell down the concentration gradient, so they are going to leave the cell, lowering the charge. But they're actually going to be open for longer, which is going to lower the resting potential lower than 70. So, that is basically everything. I'm going to take a screenshot of this for later. But let's quickly revise, well, let's quickly go through that again, just using our knowledge. So, first of all, when there is no stimuli, it's just the resting potential is minus 65 millivolts. The leaky potassium pumps are going to be, the leaky potassium channels are going to be open, which allows potassium to leave. The whole idea here is that there is a negative charge inside the cell. The sodium ion channels are closed. The sodium potassium pump is pumping out 3 sodium ions for every 2 potassium ions in. So in other words, it's a very low charge because there's more ions outside than there are in. Then depolarization occurs when there is a stimuli detected. This stimuli, if it's significant enough, will cause all of the sodium ion channels to open, but if it's not significant enough, only some will open, which will rapidly depolarize the cell, because now there is more sodium ions inside the cell than there are outside. And then to repolarize the cell, the sodium potassium ion pumps are going to open up. Sorry, the potassium ion pumps are going to open up, which will cause potassium to leave, rapidly lowering the charge, but they will remain open for longer than necessary, which will cause the resting potential to be lower than 70 millivolts temporarily. So I hope that I said all of that right. I definitely did stutter, but I know what I meant, okay? So to begin with, when there's no stimuli, we have this minus 65 millivolt resting potential. The sodium potassium pump is pumping out 3 sodium for every 2 potassium in. The sodium ion channels are closed, and the potassium ion channels are leaking out potassium. When a stimuli occurs, some sodium channels are going to open, which causes sodium to diffuse into the cell down the concentration gradient. If a stimuli is large enough, then all sodium ion channels are going to open, which will of course cause a rapid depolarization, getting to 40 millivolt charge. And finally, when that charge is reached, the potassium ion channels will open, which will cause potassium to leave a cell, diffuse out down the concentration gradient. And these sodium channels are going to be, these potassium channels will be open for longer than necessary, which will lower the resting potential below minus 70 millivolts. So, that is already the action potential revised. So, should we move on then? We can do so. I think what we should do today is I think tomorrow, because this exam is on Tuesday, okay? So I think what we should do is we should save the exam questions for tomorrow, and we should see just today about getting some general knowledge done. When I've got all this general knowledge done, which should only maybe take another 30-40 minutes, I will be going on my computer and making a quiz about this to, consolidate what I've learned. I'll be using that quiz tomorrow on stream, and then I'll also find some more quizzes, but mainly exam questions. Because, again, general knowledge and exam questions, very different, okay? Exam questions are a lot more challenging than just remembering 1 or 2 key points, So, should we go on to... I feel like we don't need to revise myogenic tissue, considering we've just done it. So I'm happy to go on to the Pacinian corpuscle, which is pressure receptors. Now, I don't recall what we need to learn about these specifically. So let's have a look here. Okay, so this is what we need to know, just some general knowledge. Receptors detect stimuli from the environment, and they are specific to one type of, stimuli. So, for example, mechanoreceptors, which is what the Pacinian corpuscle is, detect the stimuli of physical/pressure. Receptors are transducers, so they convert one type of energy to another. So pressure being converted into an electrical impulse. Yeah, so energy of stimuli converted into electrical energy of a nerve impulse. The Pacinian corpuscle is found deep in the skin, aka the dermis. So epidermis, if you imagine on a plant, the upper epidermis is like that leafy layer, where the waxy cuticle is. the dermis is the deep layer. So they're found deep in your skin. We watched a horrific video of a dead person with his hand with a big chunk cut out, and you could see it. So what it is it's a lot of layers of membrane, the Pacinian corpuscle, many layers of membrane, and these layers are located at the end of a sensory neuron. Sensory neuron, I remember trying to draw earlier, but we could maybe try and draw it again. I don't remember how you're meant to draw it. Because this is how I would draw it. Just like that, basically. But what it is it has these extra layers of membrane around it. Like that. To basically, increase its surface area. So yeah, they are most abundant in the hands, the joints, the ligaments, because obviously they're meant to be used for detecting balance, Your hands, you can feel every tiny bit of pressure, compared to like other parts of the body where you might not feel it as intensely, because obviously we have like opposable hands, we're meant to be able to feel pressure. So the way this works is rather simple. You have your regular resting potential of minus 75 millivolts. That's a bad pen, I might bin that one. So, resting potential of minus 70 millivolts. The sodium ion channels are going to be closed. So obviously sodium cannot re-enter through diffusion. Now obviously we know already how this works, where, this negative charge inside the cell is maintained because of things like the sodium-potassium pumps. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 is that when pressure is applied, it stretches the sodium channels, causing it to open and allowing sodium ions to diffuse into the cell. This will obviously increase the charge and create a generator potential, which travels down the axon as an impulse. That's all you need to know. Now, these specifically are called stretch-mediated sodium channels. So literally, when pressure is applied, oh, what's happened to my book? It's going to stretch the sodium ion channels. Causing them to open. So obviously sodium is going to diffuse into the cell, increasing the charge. There's another word here. Creating a generator potential. Which causes other Na plus channels to open. Let's just see how we word this. Opening more sodium channels and thus causing an electrical impulse. So that is actually quite a lot to get down, but really it boils down to the resting potential starts off, as we know, at minus 70 millivolts. When pressure is applied, the stretch-mediated sodium ion channels sodium channels are gonna stretch open because pressure is applied and they're stretch-mediated. This causes them to open, which allows sodium from outside the cell to diffuse into the cell, which will increase the charge and create a generator potential, opening up other sodium ion channels, allowing more sodium to diffuse in, and causing an electrical impulse, which will travel down the axon. Easy. Easy as pie. That is very easy, I think. Only just need to know a few extra keywords there. But it is literally just... Sorry, there we go. It is literally just what we learnt prior about action potential. The first bit of action potential, and then this new stuff. So, before we crack on actually with the final one, and arguably the most difficult part of this topic, I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything, because I wrote an essay about this. I want to see if I've missed anything in the essay. Oh, I didn't do an essay. Okay, cool. Well, we can crack right on then. So, receptors in the eyes are called photoreceptors. We know this already. And there are two different types, rods and cones. Now, I'm going to draw them very goofily, just because, you know, it helps me remember. But rods and cones. Okay, so, rods, I'm just going to draw like this. Cones, I'm going to draw, obviously, like a cone. So, rods and cones. Okay, cool. So, before we even get into the differences between these, let's talk about how they work. So, when light is detected, the pigment inside the rods and cones So, when there is a light source, the pigments inside the rods and cones are bleached by the light source. Now, this either occurs quickly in the cones, slow in the rods. When they're broken down, a neurotransmitter is released into the bipolar cells. And the bipolar cells then send the action potential to the sensory neurons. So, it is literally just, they are bleached. When they are bleached, are basically broken down, a neurotransmitter is released. So, let's compare them now, and we'll get back on with that later. So, rods and cones. First thing, and the easiest thing to remember, is RC, cones are for colour. And rods are not. Where did I do this at? Where the hell did I... Oh, what? No. I did do this. I wrote this down somewhere. Rods and cones. Okay, so rods can detect lower light, but cannot respond to colour. So rods are for lower light. And they are at the back of the receptors. Sorry, back of the retinas. My bad for being fucking illiterate. Okay, so this is annoying because I don't recall where I've put this work. This is an important piece here. the numbers of each receptors, and things like that. So, for rods, I might as well just use a black pen for this. I need a good one, but... For rods, there are less in the fovea. Meanwhile, these are abundant in the fovea. The name of the pigment we don't really need to know. It's rhodopsin and idopsin. Rhodopsin you can easily remember for rods. Convergence, so for rods and cones, this is different. Each rod is connected to multiple bipolar cells, but with cones, it is going to be one per. So that's basically the easiest way to remember it. Cones, one cone cell connects to one bipolar cell, but in rods, there are multiple rod cells per bipolar cell. There is a low visual acuity as a result of this, and there is a high visual acuity because of this. So in other words, it's not clear vision, very clear vision. These are more sensitive to light. And these allow for the full color spectrum. These done. So let's go over that again, because this is a bit of a challenging concept to really understand. So when light basically is detected by a rod or cone cell, it's because light will cause the bleaching of the pigment that is inside the rod or cone cell. So that's rhodopsin or idopsin. This bleaching, aka the breakdown of the pigments, is either going to be slow in the rods, fast in the cones. So when it's broken down, this will then send a neurotransmitter that is released into the bipolar cells, which will then obviously go onto your sensory neuron. But the main gimmick here is that because there's a lower visual acuity here, more rod cells need to be stimulated in order to reach an action potential. Meanwhile, with the cone cells, only one cone cell needs to be stimulated to reach an action potential. Meanwhile here, multiple need to be stimulated to reach an action potential. I think that's correct anyways. I really wish I wrote more in my book about this, because I genuinely, there's like no pages here. It's actually kind of difficult to recall what I was on about. So yeah, cones, there's 5 to 6 million in a retina. Each cone connects to one bipolar cell, so there's very visual acuity. There are no photoreceptors in the back of the optic nerve. So retinal convergence or summation leads to a low visual acuity because many rod cells connect to bipolar cells, which ensures you hit the generator potential even in low light. So, all of these rod cells are going to be connected to the same bipolar cell. And what that means is even when there's a low light intensity, it still triggers the action potential. So, I am honestly happy with wrapping things up there for today. I know that we technically weren't able to cover... We didn't cover myogenic tissue, but I think my plan now for the next hour is I'm going to sit down, work on that quiz, because obviously that will be vital for, you know, helping me make sure I actually use what I use today, knowledge-wise. So what, yeah, that's my plan. I'll make that quiz, which should take about an hour or so. There are some myogenic tissue exam questions I was given, so I might do those tomorrow, or tonight. But yeah, I hope that this was a helpful stream, for anyone who is genuinely doing A-level biology, or if you're not, I hope you enjoyed listening to me waffle for, you know, an hour, because, yeah. Obviously, as exam season gets closer, I'll be doing these streams more and more frequently. I know compared to the last couple of years, the amount of these streams I'm doing and the time I'm doing them for is less. But that is mainly because I am doing other forms of revision as well. So, I am definitely getting on. Make sure you guys are.